Welcome to today's podcast. Today's guest is Lisa Ruoff. I'm excited for you to listen to her. She is just extraordinaire. She's done so many things, and I'm excited for us to dig in and learn more about her. So welcome, Lisa.
Thanks, Shelley. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So go ahead and tell us a little more about you.
Oh, geez. In a nutshell, that's pretty difficult. But so right now I am living on the side of a mountain at 8,000 feet with my new husband and our fur babies, renovating a house and building one next door for us to kind of move to.
Wow.
We have been in this process for a couple of years, and just yesterday got us a puppy. I laugh at that because it's a 7-month-old Saint Bernard puppy, and he's already about 120 pounds.
Wow. Yeah. Those aren't small dogs.
Yeah. Our 90-pound Rottweiler looks like a dwarf now. So we're in the midst of like major puppyhood around here. But yeah, I've been kind of pushing with the podcast lately in the past couple of months because I now have 2 self-published books out, both under kind of the title of The Gallivanting Goddess. And they are based on the premise of my travels, basically in my 20s.
Okay.
And I have been carrying around these journals for decades now. And then when COVID hit, I finally had the chance to, I was given the chance.
Yeah.
Maybe I took the chance, wasn't kind of expected, but I found myself with a whole bunch of time on my hands, and I finally got to put them down. So so far there's 2, and I'm planning on, I don't know, I mean, they could go on forever, but there's at least 3 more planned.
Wow.
So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I love how you took that opportunity. It was with the COVID and, the downtime, I guess, that we were kind of forced on us, that you took that as an opportunity for growth.
Well, there was a freak out period there. It wasn't all just like unicorns and rainbows, but but it turned out good. I mean, as chaos does, it sorted itself out for the best. So I can't complain at all, because when COVID hit, I was renovating an 1820s farmhouse on an island in Vermont, and
wow.
Playing chef and doing catering and an event venue and an Airbnb and teaching cooking classes. And I thought I was diversified, and they were all in the service industry. And all of that took a hit within 2 months. So yeah, there was a bit of panic there for a while, but then real estate took off, and this old farmhouse that I had renovated skyrocketed in value. So I was saved.
Wow.
And since then, my husband and I have sold a couple of houses, renovated a couple more, sold a couple of pieces of property, and we're now situated back to where my heart has resided forever, in Colorado. So it all worked out for the best. Mm-hmm.
That's good. Yeah. So what took you to renovating older homes?
Mistake.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I ended up, well, and I've always been really handy. So even though I've been a chef for a long time, 25 years, I guess, about that, when COVID hit, and done a whole bunch of different things and traveled a bunch and tried my hand at a bunch of different stuff. But when I moved to Vermont, it was about 10 years ago, I guess, I fell in love with this property in a place called Grand Isle, which is literally an island in between New York and Vermont on Lake Champlain. Had a bridge to it, so like it was drivable. But I just fell in love with this property, and there happened to be a house on it, and it happened to be 200 years old, and I happened to get sucked in. That's how it happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. So a lot of DIY. Yeah, we're doing that. But so do you tell me, I'm interested in your chef career, because I have a daughter who wants to be chef. She loves to cook. We love to, we watch the British Bake Off and do all the fun stuff.
Right.
So what took you on?
How old is she?
She is 16.
She's 16.
Yeah.
I would say if she is interested in that, she should go and work her butt off in a restaurant for at least a year before she makes up her mind on anything.
Okay.
Not saying that I regret anything, but it is a very, very hard gig.
Yeah.
And it's not going to make her any money. And if she goes to any kind of like schooling, you know, culinary
Hmm.
schooling, she's going to have a lot of debt and it's probably never going to be paid off. So, like, that's the logical brain talking, you know?
Right.
And then when it comes to the passion for it, I mean, if you have a passion for it, that's what you do. And if you
Yeah.
love it, you love it.
Yeah.
I did for a long time and it kicked my butt for decades. And you know, it's kind of like if you talk to anyone in the industry, it's like a super unhealthy addiction. You love it, you can't help it. There are times when, you know, you think it's going to take your life and your world, and you just keep going back to it because it
Yeah.
really is, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah. I grew up with my family owning restaurants, my parents and stuff. So yeah,
Okay,
I've
so
been around that.
you get it. Yeah.
Yes.
hmm Yeah, I never had kids because I was a chef and I was a female, and that's the way it went, you know.
Hmm.
So it, like I said, when COVID hit, there was panic, and I thought that that was kind of like my world crashing down. And now that I'm kind of on this completely different path,
Yeah.
that I love. I mean, we're having a lot of fun. I'm so grateful. And there are two things that my husband knows now of me. We've been together for just 5 years. But number one is no more restaurants, no matter what I say, no matter what dream I wake up from, because I still dream about it all the time.
Oh yeah.
And number two, no old farmhouses.
Oh yeah.
They're the two things. Like, no, no more. I did. Okay, it's off the bucket list. Uh-huh.
So the house you're renovating now is a little newer. Then it's not
Yeah,
as
I mean, I still got sucked in, but it's not a 200-year-old house.
yeah.
No, we started, actually, we moved out here in our RV from Vermont and had bought property and knew we were planning on building, and we were just going to take our time because he retired 2 years ago, like
Okay.
literally retired, had a like a real job that he retired from, not unlike me. And things just took too long, you know. Our permitting process took too long, and we actually left for one winter for 4 months and went to Mexico because I was like, I'm not living in an RV at 8,000 feet all winter. That's just not
Yeah.
happening.
A bit cold.
So we left, and it cost us just as much as it would have to stay here. And we had a
Uh-huh.
great time, but we were looking at winter number two of not having anywhere to live, and we decided to buy the fixer upper next door. So
Mm.
so now we just put everything on hold for a while. It was like, we have the excavator, we have all the tools. This is what we are going to do anyway. So we might as well just, you know, shift our focus a little bit and renovate this house next door, and then we'll sell it, and hopefully we can pay off our other house when we get to building that, you know, just
Yeah. One project to the next.
yeah,
That's good.
yeah.
I mean,
It's
one, you
like,
just little steps, right?
yeah. And I mean, life happens, things
Yeah.
change, plans change, and
Yeah.
we don't, you know, whatever. It would be great to be working on my own house right now, but it's a house, and we love doing what we're doing, and we love being creative, and we love working on this stuff. And we have the time and the energy and the finances to do it. So we're completely fortunate.
That's
Yeah.
good. And I think it's not always the end product, it's the journey, right? That's
Oh,
where the
totally.
growth comes, is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
journey. So
hmm And once you start losing that, then you start losing the joy in things, I think.
yes,
Yeah.
like you
hmm
said, the creation
Yeah.
of it's within us. We're
Yep.
creators.
Yep.
So tell me where did your journey of going on travels start? Was that at a really young age, or how did that start for you?
Yeah. My family traveled a lot when I was younger, and you know, just the normal stuff. I mean, we had exchange students, and we would go visit them, or
Oh, cool.
my sisters were exchange students, and we would visit them. And so there were a couple of I kind of grew up with that. Like, traveling was kind of part of our lives. I mean,
Uh-huh.
we were very stable, but travel was it always happened at least once a year. But for me, it was, when did it happen? I mean, I left home at 18, and moved to Colorado, and just kind of started partying hard.
Where'd
And
you grow
in
up?
all of Jersey.
Okay.
Yeah. So my mom is still in Jersey.
Okay.
Still have the same house that I grew up in, and all of that fun stuff. But there's six of us in the family, and
Okay.
I was kind of the wild child, the youngest of six. And when I got a taste of my own freedom, it was like, okay, I want to travel. Like, I want to travel the world. I want to get out of here. I want to see what there is to see. I want to experience other cultures and differences and people and places. And the first place that I went overseas by myself was Australia. Excuse my cough. I'm just getting over 2 months of this.
Yeah.
But that was in, so the Bite of the Travel Bug, which is my most recent published book, is my travels through Australia and then to Africa. And
Okay.
that was like a year of time that I took out, and it was just incredible. I mean, I can't say that every aspect was amazing. I mean, it was crazy and scary, and my guardian angels were working overtime, I am more than sure.
Yeah.
But it kind of opened this other world for me. For anyone that has traveled, especially kind of with a backpack and hitchhiking into places that are not tourist areas and not to all inclusives, and just really immersing yourself in another culture with different people and not knowing where you're going to end up or where you're going, and just kind of being in the experience, really changed my life. I
Yeah, I
can't,
bet.
yeah, just, my perspective and my outlook on things, I have realized in my older years, is completely different from other people, people that
Hmm.
haven't done that. And if you have done it, you understand what I mean. And if you
Yeah.
haven't done it, just go do it. That's, I think that that's kind of the biggest learning experience, the biggest, like, just the knowledge that you get from stepping out of your comfort zone
Hmm.
is not something that you can read in a book, and is not
Yeah.
even something that someone can teach you. It's something that you have to experience on your own. Mm-hmm.
But I bet you in your book, do you share a lot of your stories and travels and experiences that way?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And there's some crazy stuff that I went through.
Hmm.
It's kind of a mix of a broken-hearted adventure, because I was also engaged to a South African guy at the time, which, obviously, without giving a spoiler, didn't work out, but that's part of the book.
Hmm.
And that's how I ended up in Africa for 3 months, 4 months.
Okay.
So yeah, it's definitely a mix of. It's kind of interesting for me now to write it in retrospect, because
Uh-huh.
I wrote it from journals, so a lot of it is literally from what I wrote 25 years ago,
Hmm.
but with my perspective of now instead of then. So
Right.
you do get a little bit, as the reader, you do get a little bit of what was going on then in my 25-year-old head, which is
Hmm.
completely different now.
Yeah.
um, and also kind of the ruminations of how I look at those things now. And a lot of that, specifically, what I can tangibly tell you is the environmental aspect of that for me. Like, I've always been very environmentally aware and conscious and sustainable, and the hippie thing and all that.
Uh-huh.
But the biggest things that I noticed now in my early 50s as compared to then in my 20s was, and I don't know that any of us really understood how fortunate we all were, to experience the world then as
Mhm.
compared to now. Like, there are no reef systems left, like, the world is changing environmentally. It's a scientific fact that it's not the same world. It's not the same planet as it was
Mhm.
25 years ago. And I lived in Alaska for 8 years as a sea kayak guide. And I did
Wow.
all these, like, kind of crazy, quote unquote, things. At the time, I
Uh-huh.
just did them because they were fun, like, I was
Right.
young and I wanted to experience things, and I did them. And then when I wasn't doing them anymore is when you realize what you did, like,
Yeah.
when I was a kayak guide in Alaska, sure, I loved it. It was great, but I
It was
didn't
the
have
normal for
anything to
you.
compare it to. So
Yeah.
it was just my life. And then when I
Yeah.
left and I came back down to what we call the lower 48, I was like, wow, I was so spoiled. Like, I had no idea how good my life was until I didn't have it anymore.
Right.
But life goes on, you pick and choose.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what took you to Australia first? What was
Uh,
the draw there?
I I wanted to go travel on my own. Well, actually, it wasn't even necessarily on my own. I just wanted to travel, and I couldn't really find anyone to come with me. So it was
Uh-huh.
like, well, I guess I'm going by myself. I just decided one day. I sat down and opened my sister's big, huge atlas, World Atlas, back in the day when it was that huge book that was all color and glossy, and I love that thing.
Yeah.
And I just said, I'm going to open it up and I'm going to put my finger down somewhere, and that's where I'm going to go. And it was Australia's. So that's where I
Wow.
went.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
I didn't really know anything about it. I didn't know what I was getting into. I just that's how it happened.
And how did your parents feel about this?
Well, my dad died when I was 17. So I
Okay.
think that probably had a lot to do with like my wanderlust of
Hmm.
not really caring and wanting to like not having any fear or like I just, for a while I kind of went nuts because it was a really big deal for me at 17 and being the
Yeah.
youngest of six kids and the last one at home and all that. And my mom and I never, I mean, we did, we were kind of the family unit. I mean, there were six kids. We all grew up together in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and had the normal life. I mean, as I say, it was kind of like Brady Bunch-ish, had the pool in the backyard and the new car every whatever. But my mom and I never really got along. So
Mhm.
after my dad died and I left for college, it kind of split. And when I moved to Colorado when did I move out here? I guess I was 19 after a couple of years of college. And then I dropped out to become a bartender and moved to Colorado. No, my mom wasn't really very proud of
Yeah.
me. That was really kind of challenging for her and for us. But I needed to do my thing and she needed to let me go. So over the
Uh-huh.
years, we've definitely come back together again and done our back and forth thing, but
Mhm.
we've always kind of been like oil and water.
Yeah.
So yeah, there
So
were
was your
definitely
dad more,
times.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say there were definitely times that I needed her help and she was there for me.
Hmm.
But this was never really a joint venture. This was
Uh-huh.
something that she had to put up with, and I didn't even. It wasn't even really in my thought process that this had any bearing on my mother whatsoever. Of
Right.
course it did, but I was 20 years old. Like I wasn't
Yeah.
thinking about her. Yeah.
Yeah. You were spreading your wings, and so
Yep.
was your dad the travel one or both your parents? It just,
They both did. They
yeah.
both traveled. My dad was kind of the fun-loving one who loved
Mhm.
to go. Like he used to have a motorcycle before he had all of us kids, and him and my uncle, they were twins. They
Okay.
loved to go play together.
Uh-huh.
So I think that he may have been kind of the impetus behind a lot of that, but
Uh-huh.
they were very much a couple. They were very much together in their ventures. Hmm.
That's good.
Yeah.
So what took you like, so you were in Australia and did you meet the guy you were engaged with? Did you meet him online or how did you meet him if he was
No, no. At
okay?
that point, I mean, this is 25 years ago. There was no online.
That's
you
true.
know,
That's true.
yeah, it was a totally different scene.
Yes.
No, we met in Colorado. So
Okay.
he had traveled a bunch before I met him, and he was in Colorado for, I guess he was here for a couple of years. And we had lived together here. We were in a relationship when I decided to go travel.
Okay.
He decided not to come with me because he went back to South Africa
Hmm.
because he had just been traveling a long time. And it was just one of those things that it was like, okay, well, I mean, I would love to do this with you, but the timing's not right. And,
Hmm.
I just need to do it anyway. And you've already done it. So I went and did my 6 months in Australia. And then after that, ended up in South Africa to be with him. And that's part of the process of the book too. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So
And
what are
mhm.
some now in retrospect, would you do it again? Like would you encourage others to do it? And
Oh, totally.
yeah.
I don't have, I mean, I can't say I have no regrets because, I'm 52. I'm sure there's regrets in there somewhere, but,
Slim.
it's right. I kind of feel like regrets are just a waste of energy.
Mm.
Like, okay, not everyone's life is perfect. And when we're young, we all make some stupid mistakes and choices. But I don't really consider those choices wrong. You know, they may have been dumb, but I I don't regret it at all. And I really think, especially when you travel at that age, you realize that most of the world, uh, in between like college and life, take off time. You know, they take off
Mm.
a year. That's pretty normal for most people to do. Most of Europe does that. I know Australians do that.
Mhm.
A lot of the rest of the first world countries just, they really focus on having their kids have an experience of their own, where we don't. We like to insulate. We have this fear of the unknown out there, and I've my take on that is, now in my 50s and after experiencing all of this, is that I think that the United States is an island. You know, I mean, we've got
Mm.
Canada to the north and Mexico to the south, but like when you compare us to a country in Europe, that, you know, you go 2 hours and you're in another country, and then you go
Yeah.
another hour and you're in another country. Like
Yeah.
their their culture is kind of right on top of each other. It's very
Mhm.
close. It has to be accepted. I mean, maybe not historically, in that kind of geographical location to another country, a different language, different culture. You know, we don't have that.
Right.
So I think that it scares us. I think that the unknown really scares us as Americans, to kind of like venture out of our, and we have a huge country. So
Yeah.
we can go from state to state and get different cultures, but it's just a different experience, you know?
Right.
And a lot of us, we certainly, I know when I was 20 anyway, that was not something, my parents did not say, I think that you should go have an experience and travel the world for a year. Like, hell no. They were like, what is wrong with you? You know, no, don't do that. That's crazy. That's dangerous. And that's just not how a lot of other people
Right.
live.
Yeah,
Hmm.
we are more of a adventurous type family, I guess.
Well, it seems like it. 5 kids in an RV for a while.
Yeah, we traveled for a year in RV and it was supposed to be two, but things led to something else. And
Right.
our kids have traveled abroad for different reasons, for service, just humanitarian things. And just, yeah, we're like, go have that experience.
Yeah.
And we talked about how, back 25 years ago or whatever, it was such a different world. And
Hmm.
now with the internet, to me, it feels like the world's a little smaller because we can connect with those on the other
Oh,
side
yeah.
more than them. So how do you think that has an impact for those traveling now?
You know, that's a very interesting question, because when we went, this was 2 winters ago, when my husband and I went to Mexico for 4 months, in
Hmm.
between that building stuff, and we found ourselves without a house, and we were like, well, we could rent something here for the winter and ski, or we could go and put our backpacks on for 4 months, and it would cost us less to go somewhere
Uh-huh.
else, you know, like, and we were in that position where we didn't have to worry about a job to go to, and, you know, like, it was just it just converged.
Uh-huh.
And what we found, because I can't say I hadn't been traveling, but I hadn't been traveling with a backpack for a decade or more, you know.
Hmm.
And that was the decade that social media and the internet kind of took off.
Uh-huh.
And we went to a lot of places that were not tourist places, that were very local, that, you know, nobody spoke English and they didn't see tourists very often. And what we found was that the social media and the internet, accessibility and marketing of places, what
Hmm.
is not always welcome, you know.
Mm.
For instance, 25 years ago, Cancun and Tulum was nothing. I mean, Tulum was a little village, you know. Everybody in the world knows where Tulum is now. You say it and it's like, sure, I've been there. But when we went to that area, which was probably the most touristy populated area that we went to in Mexico, and we left real quick because we were like, whoa, this is not our gig.
Just too
but
crowded,
it
too
was way too many
touristy.
gringos. Yeah, like
Yeah.
it just wasn't Mexico for us, you know, like
Right.
nobody spoke English. Everybody's speaking Spanglish and drinking crappy margaritas and getting drunk everywhere. It's like
Mm.
this is just not our experience.
Uh-huh.
But, you know, I mean, that's what it's there for. And they make a lot of money off of that. But what we found is Tulum, what 10, 12 years ago is when it took off. And what happened was, as with so many other places around the globe, social media hit, people start posting pictures of beautiful places, and everybody
Mhm.
wants to go there. And literally within months, this little village got inundated with hundreds of thousands of tourists,
Wow.
and they couldn't handle it. Like, they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the sewage systems, they don't have the water,
Mhm.
they don't have the hotels, you know, like, but
Mhm.
people don't stop coming. They just expect you to put up with it. Like, well, we're here
Wow.
now and we have money, so we want all of this stuff. You know, we
Uh-huh.
want you to have the all inclusives, and we want the little palapas over the blue ocean, and we want our drinks when we want our drinks, and we, you know, and it wasn't happening, and their entire system almost collapsed. Like,
Mm.
literally their septic systems and their water systems, and I mean their airports and their cabs, like they didn't have anything to support this kind of growth exponentially in such a small amount of time.
Yeah.
And that's what we heard over and over again from all of these little places is, if we went to little villages where people didn't speak English and they never saw, especially, I will say, not whites, but specifically Americans, because
Mhm.
Americans don't like to go to those places, they would beg us to not put pictures on the internet.
That's
Like,
interesting.
please don't do this. Like, we've
Mhm.
seen this happen to all of these different places, and we don't, we want our village to stay a village, you know? I
Yeah.
mean, there's kind of this catch 22 that we think, being the white gringos with the money, you know, like we think we're doing everyone a favor by going with our money. And they're like, you know, we don't really want your money. We want our way of life, you know?
Mhm.
And it's really hard to hold on to when you're up against something like the internet.
Yeah. That's amazing to
So,
think about. I've never heard that perspective before, but I can totally see that how,
yeah,
yeah, they
it's,
just want their way of life. They don't want
yeah,
to
yeah.
treasure
I
this.
mean, of course, there's always going to be those business people, and there's always going to be those people that want the money, and
Mhm.
and then think that it's going to be helpful. But the wiser people, after seeing it, are like, oh, geez, like this is the end of our world as we know it. You know,
Yeah.
there's almost no stopping it. You can't do that. But we did still find some places that were untouched that was really cool. And, you know, of course, I'm still posting crap on Facebook, and I'm still putting my pictures up. Like, I'm trying to not be that person, but it's so ingrained in who we are that we don't
Yeah.
even understand our actions at this point, you know?
Right. We
Yeah.
want to share
So,
the beauty and what we're
yeah.
experiencing it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of that too, it didn't feel too bad because a lot of those places that we went to were really hard to get to. You know, like,
Mhm.
I don't have airports. You have to sit on a bus for 8 hours to get to some, you know, village in the middle of nowhere with chickens, and that's what makes it so good. And at the same time, when you're there are no all inclusives in places like that. You know, like, you
Mhm.
can't get a little umbrella in your drink. You can't even get a drink. You're lucky if you find a little bakery with bread. Like,
Uh-huh.
that's part of the traveling experience, though, you know,
Mhm.
is not having your every whim catered to at every moment. Like, to me, that's not traveling. That's a vacation for some people, but I can't even sit on a beach for more than 2 days. You know, like,
Mhm.
I gotta experience, I gotta be.
Yeah, experience the local life, right?
Yeah,
How
yeah,
the locals
uh-huh.
live and
And sometimes that means you don't eat very good food for a little while.
right.
Yeah, but that's part of it.
So
Yeah.
did you take backup like, granola bars or things like
Oh
that
yeah,
in case you're
always. We
not in a
always,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Toilet paper, extra
Uh-huh.
food, always water. Like, there was always
Mhm.
the basics. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you never really knew if you were going to have to hike for a while or if you were going to get a ride, or, you know. But the beauty of traveling that way too is that we had 4 months. I mean, you know,
Mhm.
if you're going somewhere, and that was what I did in my 20s too. I mean, I took 6 months in Australia, I took 4 months in Africa. Like it wasn't a 2 week vacation.
Uh-huh.
You can't travel like that in 2 weeks. You have to have things planned, because when you travel like that, sometimes you have to sit in a bus station for 2 days waiting for the right bus. Like
Mm.
you don't have the time or the luxury to do that. And I say luxury, I mean, it's certainly not luxurious sitting around a bus station for 2 days waiting for your bus. But,
Time
you
wise.
know, yeah, you have the time and the energy to do that. And when you find yourself in those situations, yeah, you got to break out the granola bars and the nuts and the water out of your pack somewhere.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
on your travels, both when you were younger and now, are you a planner or you just kind of go with the flow of what takes you to the next place?
I am way more of a go with the flow kind of person,
Okay.
but I'm married now, and that's a different story.
Oh yeah.
So I didn't I mean, we just met 5 years ago. We've been married for 2.5 years, and I'm 52. So it's taken me a long time to settle down,
Uh-huh.
for many reasons, which is a whole other book. But
Yeah, yeah.
but
It's
I
coming.
mean, right. That's later. But we get along great. And when we first took our first trip together, it was to Spain. For He came for 2 weeks, I went for a month. And it was very interesting because I had done a lot of third world backpack traveling, and he
Mhm.
had been, he worked as a scientist in a lab for 30 years.
Oh
Like,
wow.
so he's been out of the country twice,
Mhm.
when I met him, but for no longer than for 10 days at a time, and then he meets me, and I'm kind of like this crazy world traveler, that's writing books about her stuff.
Uh-huh.
And it was interesting because when we decided to go to Spain, I was like, we're gonna see what this is made of real quick. Like I'm
Yeah.
completely 100% aware of that. And he was
Uh-huh.
just like, we're going to Spain, it'll be cool. I'm like, I hope so. Like
Yeah.
maybe not. I don't know. But we learned each other well enough to know now that I know what his needs are, and
Mhm.
they're a lot higher than what my needs are. And that's fine. I'm not 25 anymore. So I don't need to be carrying around my sleeping bag and my thermarest and my
Uh-huh.
rain gear and all that. Like, it's nice to kind of be spoiled, but at the same time, there's a happy medium there.
Yeah.
There's like okay, you don't want to share a bathroom. We have to make sure that we have our own bathroom.
Oh
But
wow.
for me, like in a hostel, I'm used to sleeping in bunk beds with 10 people in a room. And,
Uh-huh.
like, so once again, I'm not 25 anymore. So
Right.
I'm not complaining about it at all. But yeah,
Mhm.
he's a little more high maintenance than me when it comes to traveling.
And so I think it sounds like that, getting out of your comfort zone, at least for him, this is really a different change when going on that trip, that it helps
Yeah.
you to grow. And you're the comfort zone of, yeah, learning about each other
Yeah.
out of your own space.
And
That,
we have gotten to the point now that when we travel, we probably plan about half of it.
mhm.
Like I know for him, he needs to know where he's going to be for the first 2 nights that he gets off a plane.
Mhm.
Like especially if it's in a foreign country where he doesn't speak the language and he doesn't know where he is, and we're with backpacks. It's not like we ever tour around anywhere,
Uh-huh.
but he needs to have a landing zone just so he can get his bearings, and then
Right.
after that we can kind of go do our thing. So we've kind of gotten to the point where it's usually about 50% planned, and then when we get there he's fine with changing that plan. Once he gets
Mhm.
comfortable in being wherever we are, then that can change. But for me, I never would have. Like, for me, I'm like, whatever, just get on a plane and go and figure it out. So,
Yeah.
there's a little bit of compromise there.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Which is good. Helps you grow. You both are growing together.
Well, it,
Yeah.
it it forces me to be a little more responsible, like instead
Uh-huh.
of just granted, I'd like to think that I'd still do that the way that I did it in my 20s, but I'm not in my 20s anyway. Like I said, I'm not complaining. It works really well for both of us.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So with your books, what is some takeaways that you would like people to get from them?
Um, when I started writing, it was more of a focus of sharing my stories.
Hmm.
I had all these adventures, and being in my bubble, they were just my adventures. I didn't really think much of them. And then as
Right.
I moved to Vermont, and I started talking to people about my adventures, and what I got was my friend Jim, who lives in Colorado too, he grew up in the Adirondacks. And when I told him I was moving to Vermont, his very first response was, he looked at me and he said, "You're going to be very interesting there." And I was like, "What? What does that mean? Like, Jim, you're so weird. What does that mean?" 2 years later, I call him up and I'm like, "Oh my God, I had no idea." Like, that's all that people said. "Wow, you're so interesting." I'm like, what is this about? But once again, it's that insulated kind of thing. Like,
Uh-huh.
I had been living in my bubble and surrounded by other people that had traveled a lot, had their own adventures, and
Hmm.
it wasn't really that big of a deal. And then I put myself into this other living situation where people didn't do that and started talking about just my past and my adventures, and people were like, "Whoa, like, no, that's not normal. People don't do that." So it quickly became more of a, I'll say, less of an egocentric thing, like
Hmm.
less about me just telling my stories, because yeah, my stories are fun and adventurous, but everybody has stories, right? Like, I mean, they're a dime a dozen nowadays, especially with the internet and self-publishing and all that. And for me, it kind of turned into more of a, number one, um, women's empowerment thing.
Mm.
Because the way that I've lived my life has always been, without a doubt, unquestionably, I can do anything I want. It's
Uh-huh.
not a matter of what I can or can't do, it's a matter of what I choose.
Right.
And for some reason, I mean, like, I was one of five girls, right? So we all grew up with a father who taught us how to change tires in the car. And he was, like,
That's
it
awesome.
never dawned on me that because I was a woman, I shouldn't do this by myself.
Hmm.
Like, it just was like, that had no bearing on me at all. And
I have
and
five
in
daughters. I told you I have five,
really,
but yes, I have five
uh,
daughters. My youngest loves to run our bulldozer and our
right,
tractors, and yes.
right. And I get, and it's totally, I when you grow up as a female in this world, of course there is a standard, as you understand, you're a woman,
Hmm.
but there's a standard of differences between men and women. And
Hmm.
even in our country and in our equality, there just is.
And
We
there
don't
should be.
have,
We're different.
yeah. We don't have to wear burqas, I mean, we don't
Right.
have that kind of oppression, but there's a difference,
Mhm.
and when you travel the world as a single female, or you become a chef as a female, or you know, anything really. I mean, we move to Alaska and become a freaking sea kayak guide in the middle of the wilderness. Like, it never dawned on me that being a woman was kind of an extra added hurdle, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Until later, until really, it was almost like in my 30s when it dawned on me, like, wait, there's not other women doing this stuff. Like,
Hmm.
why not? Like, why is nobody doing this stuff? Or
Yeah.
even when I was traveling, you would meet other people, but they would be together. Like
Hmm.
women, especially, they would just start with friends because it was too scary, it was too fearful for them to go by themselves.
Hmm.
So I think a lot of this too is me kind of empowering, boosting up other females, because I've heard so many other women say, "God, I wish that I just had the guts to do that." And I'm like, it never dawned on me to not, just
Hmm.
because I was a woman, to be scared of something. Like, that to me is so limiting. Why would you do that
Yeah.
to you? Like, yeah, okay, there's a truth that there's a different set of standards out there for women as to men, but if that's how you grew up and that, like, that's who you are, that's what you deal with every day. Like,
Hmm.
for me, it's almost scarier to know that I've got to walk through like a parking garage by myself at 8 o'clock at night. Like, I can't do that, but I can put a backpack on and travel through Africa,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
so it just depends on your perspective,
Right.
so that's number one for me, is really the women's empowerment thing. And especially after being a female chef for 25 years in an extremely male dominant world.
Yes.
Um, and number two is environmentalism. I've
Mm.
always called myself an environmentalist. And I didn't, as we don't know, that when we're going through something 25 years later, looking back on it, like the environmental issues and knowledge and education that I've learned just from traveling in different times on this planet
Hmm.
is, I mean, I can't even explain like the ahas that I've gotten from that, later. I mean,
Yeah.
in my 20s when I was traveling, I was partying and drunk. I didn't think about that stuff, but of course
Mm.
I went on all the hikes and I went to all the rainforests and I went to the oceans and I did, when you're traveling, you do those things.
Uh-huh.
And then 25 years later to look back on those same places and go, "Oh my God, they don't exist anymore." Like,
Wow.
whoa, like I'm not saying I didn't enjoy them and appreciate them while I was there, but I could have done a lot more. If I
Yeah.
knew at the time what I know now, I would have had a different experience.
And what a
And
unique perspective you do have, though, that you can see that difference, that you
yeah, I
traveled
mean,
when you're
there's part
younger
of
and are
me,
still traveling.
yeah, and there's part of me, it's like a half and half. It's like a what I would call a divine dichotomy, right? Like
Mhm.
I I'm so grateful that I had that experience to dive in the Great Barrier Reef in 1995 or whatever it was, and
Uh-huh.
have those memories of those colors and those fish and those, like, I'll never forget the sounds of being underwater.
Yeah.
But at the time, that was just what it was. Like, we
Right.
didn't know that in 20 years it was going to be dead. Like,
Wow.
maybe in theory there was a possibility. And I think that that's kind of the planet that we're living on now, is that these theories of possibilities I have actually experienced. So they hit me a lot stronger on
Hmm.
environmental levels.
Uh-huh.
Like when it's a possibility that something's going to disappear, I've just experienced that in like 5 different aspects. I've just experienced that. So I pay more attention now. You know, I I'm a lot more aware of my privilege. I'm a lot more
Mhm.
aware of the beauty that's around me instead of just taking it all for granted, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's what I call environmentalism for me.
Mhm.
I know that it's different for everyone else, but it really hit home, all of those things. I mean, going and being out in the middle of Africa where we're dealing with all kinds of wild animals, like you can't just set up a tent out there and not think
Right.
about that stuff.
Yeah.
Or we couldn't then. Now it's a different story, like those things don't exist. I don't want to say they don't exist, but not like they did 25 years ago. It's the same thing with any reef system I've ever been to. I mean, we dealt with the same thing when we went to Mexico 2 years ago. And I just sat, it was mind boggling to me how, okay, I had been to that reef decades ago for a weekend or something.
Uh-huh.
But knowing that that reef was very similar to the Great Barrier Reef, and in like the ecosystems and, the coral and the fish life and all of that stuff. And then seeing it now and going diving now or even snorkeling where it was, I have to say, I cried on the shore for 2 days. I just sat there and cried because it was
Wow.
so like overwhelming to me that I, I was just in that water. I just had a snorkel on and nothing is alive. There's no
Wow.
fish anymore. There's
Hmm.
no colors anymore. And still, there are gazillions of people out here on boats in diving equipment thinking that they're looking at a live reef because they don't know the difference. And
Yeah.
nobody's telling them. They're
Hmm.
thinking that this algae green crap is what a reef looks like. And I'm like, it's dead. No one's even telling them it's dead. They don't even know the difference.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking. And I can't even imagine being a scientist who has spent your whole life watching this stuff and looking at the what I call insanity in front of you. How do you metabolize that? Like, how do you deal with that on a regular basis? Like, it's breaking my heart. And this is just a vacation for me?
Right.
So it's stuff like that that really, really hit home. And and that's what I wrote like in my first book. It was way more about my travels. It was written specifically in journal format because it was easier for me, honestly. I just
Uh-huh.
took my journal and I put it in a book format and I could get away with a whole bunch of, like grammatical errors, and it didn't matter because it was written like journal.
Uh-huh.
But the second book was way more of a, I mean, yes, it is a travel book, but it's way more of an introspect of from here, my viewpoint from now as to then, you know.
Uh-huh. Which
Yeah.
is awesome that you can share that.
Yeah.
Difference.
Yeah. Because it went more for me like what you said, like what am I trying to get through to the reader? What is my point here? You know,
Right.
like do I just want to share my stories? Do I just want to fill my ego and have people think that I'm really cool? Great. So are millions of other people, you know. But no, I want to share what I got from it now. I want to share those perspectives that I can see now, that what has changed me from my life, you know,
Yeah.
like what in my experience, how has that changed the way that I live? And the answer to that is pretty much everything. Like I can't even imagine what my life would have been like if I didn't travel, if I had taken another route, you know. I don't know, because I never did. But it's to know what those differences are, to know the difference of my choices in my 20s and what made my life different now because of those choices 25 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe that's knowledge, maybe that's wisdom. I don't know, at least I'm getting something out of it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's not completely wasted on me, you know.
Like you're saying, it's your story and everyone has stories, but it is your story and it's unique and it's fascinating. I think everybody has a story and they don't have the same perspective. They don't have the same experiences. So it's good that you're
Right.
sharing them and that you're
And
helping.
it's pretty amazing because just with us, right? Like, I mean, when you start thinking about perspective, it's very interesting because we could go to an amusement park together and have the same day, do the same things at the same time during the same day, and come out with two completely different stories.
Yep.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
so it doesn't even really matter. I think that you don't really understand that until you've been there and done that a couple of times. At least I didn't anyway. You know,
Uh-huh.
I mean, when you're getting drunk on a beach with a bunch of people, you expect that everyone's having the same drunken experience, but you don't know that until later. You know, like when you really kind of grow a little bit into the knowledge of, no, everyone's got like, yeah, 99% of our experience and our makeup is the same, but that 1% is so mind-blowingly different.
Yeah.
You know, just that
Yeah.
little like tiny percentage of it really just makes us who we are.
Yeah.
And we're all completely different.
Yeah. And to share it, and it helps encourage, inspire, all these things when we help each other and learn from each other. So I love that
Right.
you're sharing all this.
Right. And warn too. I mean, there's a lot of warnings in there.
Yeah, right. But that's the wisdom, the knowledge, the experiences to share.
Right. The mistakes.
Yeah. That's so good. Well,
Yeah.
Lisa, I appreciate you being on with me today. And can you tell the listeners where they can get your books?
Yeah. So actually, this is the last one. This is called The Bite of the Travel Bug.
Mm-hmm.
And these are both Gallivanting Goddess series. And the first one is called Alaska to Cuba and Back. And they are both available on my website, which is lisaruoff.com, or Amazon or Barnes and Noble or any of those places online. They're all online too. So
Okay.
yeah. And I'm also on Facebook and Instagram and all that fun stuff. So I keep people posted as to what's going on, and I have the utmost intention of getting the next book out within a year. And the reality is probably not going to happen. But I'll keep people posted if they're interested in finding out. Yeah.
Awesome. And we will leave all those links in the show notes as well, so people
Okay,
can
great.
check that out. So
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it, and sharing your experiences and your wisdom and knowledge and all these things. So it's been great.
Thank you, Shelley. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, thanks for your time.
You're welcome.
And make sure that you empower those 5 girls.
That's right.